Luke Carter had learned to live with hunger. At 17, he was thin as a fence rail, with sunburned skin and calloused hands that told the story of too many hard jobs and too little pay. He had been on his own for 2 years, ever since cholera took his parents in a matter of days. The townsfolk of Dry Creek never said it to his face, but he knew the way they saw him, a stray dog sniffing around for scraps. Most nights, he slept in the loft of an abandoned barn on the edge of town, curled up in an old horse blanket that smelled of dust and mold. Days were spent sweeping floors at the mercantile, mending fences for cattlemen who barely noticed him, or hauling water for pennies. He spoke little, laughed even less, and trusted no one. In a town where every face knew every other, Luke Carter was the boy people looked past. The afternoon was blistering hot, a kind of heat that made the streets shimmer and the air taste like dust. Luke had been walking back from the blacksmith's, a small bundle of cornbread wrapped in cloth tucked under his arm, when he heard raised voices near the trading post. At first, he thought it was the usual bark of drunken cowhands, but as he rounded the corner, the scene unfolded sharp and clear. 3 men, swaying slightly with the smell of whiskey on them, had backed a frail old native man against the wall. The elder's hair was long and silver, his weathered face calm but his eyes alert. He wore a faded buckskin shirt, its beadwork dull with age, and he clutched a walking stick that seemed more for tradition than support. The tallest of the 3 aggressors jabbed a finger into the elder's chest. "Don't you come sniffing around here, old man," he slurred. "Ain't no place for your kind." The second man laughed, a nasty hollow sound. "Maybe he's looking for handouts. Or maybe he's looking for trouble." The third reached for the walking stick, yanking it out of the elder's grasp and tossing it into the dirt. The old man staggered but didn't fall. His dignity, Luke noticed, stayed rooted in place even as the men jeered. Luke's first instinct was to keep walking. It wasn't his business. Folks who stepped into trouble usually ended up buried under it, and no one in Dry Creek would thank him for defending a native elder. In fact, most would likely spit at him for it, but there was something in the way. The old man stood, quiet but unbending. That froze Luke's feet in place. The tallest man shoved the elder again, harder this time, and Luke felt something tighten in his chest. Before he could talk himself out of it, he set down his cornbread and stepped forward. "Leave him alone." The words came out steady, even though Luke's heart was hammering in his ribs. The 3 men turned toward him, surprise flashing before. Their expression shifted to mean grins. "Well, well," the second man drawled, "if it ain't the little street rat." The third spat into the dust. "Go on, boy. This ain't your fight." Luke met the tall man's gaze without flinching. "It is now." There was a pause, short, tense, dangerous. Then the tall man took a step toward him, fists curling. Luke braced himself, shifting his weight the way his father had once taught him when they split wood together. The first punch came fast. Luke ducked, swinging back and catching the man across the jaw. Pain shot up his knuckles, but he didn't stop. The second man lunged, grabbing Luke's shirt, and they went down hard in the dust, rolling and grappling. The third moved toward the elder, but the old man, quicker than he looked, scooped up his stick and cracked it sharply against the man's shin. By the time the scuffle ended, all 3 aggressors were cursing and limping away, muttering threats over their shoulders. Luke stood there, breathing hard, sweat and dust clinging to his face. The elder studied him for a long moment, eyes dark and unreadable. Then he bent slightly in a gesture that felt like respect. "You fight with your heart, boy," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of many winters. Luke didn't know what to say, so he just nodded, picked up his cornbread, and walked away. But as he reached the edge of town, he realized something strange. The old man was still watching him, and Luke had the uneasy feeling that this wasn't the end of their meeting. Asterisk. Luke's fists clenched at his sides as he stood in the dusty street, the heat shimmering in the air between him and the scene unfolding by the trading post. The 3 men locals he knew by face, if not by name, were circling the old native elder like buzzards, their jeers carrying in the still air. The elder, stooped with age, clutched a small cloth bundle to his chest. His braids were streaked with silver, his eyes calm but wary. Each time he tried to step away, one of the men blocked his path. They laughed like it was sport. Luke's gut burned. He'd seen plenty of cruelty in his short life, but something about this, maybe it was the way the old man's dignity stayed intact despite the humiliation. Maybe it was the fact no one else was stepping in. The townsfolk nearby turned their faces, pretending not to see. A shopkeeper stood at his doorway, arms folded, muttering, "Ain't our problem." Luke stepped forward before he could think better of it. "Leave him alone," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. The 3 men turned as one, surprise flashing across their faces before curling into sneers. The tallest, a red-faced man with a belly like a beer barrel, grinned. "Well, look who thinks he's a hero. The barn rat." Luke ignored the insult and walked right up to them, putting himself between the elder and the men. "You've had your fun. Now move on." One of the men, stringy-haired and mean-eyed, took a step forward. "Or what? You gonna cry on us?" "Boy," Luke kept his stance steady, "or I make you regret it." They laughed, but it was short-lived. The tallest one reached out, shoving Luke hard in the chest. He stumbled back but caught his footing. When the man moved to shove him again, Luke drove his shoulder into the man's gut, knocking the wind out of him. The others lunged. Luke ducked under a swinging arm, grabbed a fistful of the stringy-haired man's shirt, and sent him sprawling into the dust. The third one tried to grab Luke from behind, but Luke twisted free, catching him across the jaw with a wild, desperate punch. Pain shot up Luke's knuckles, but the man staggered back, swearing. "You're gonna pay for this," the tall one gasped. But there was no fire left in his voice. The old man's gaze was steady, his expression unreadable. Luke didn't look back at him. He kept his eyes locked on the men until they finally turned and stomped away, muttering threats. Only then did Luke let out the breath he'd been holding. His heart hammered in his ears. "You shouldn't have done that," the elder said quietly, his voice low and accented. Luke turned to face him. "And let them keep at it? No chance." The old man studied him for a long moment as if weighing his words. "Trouble will follow you now." Luke shrugged, trying to play it off. "Trouble's been following me my whole life." The elder's mouth curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "Then perhaps this is fate." Before Luke could respond, the old man reached into his bundle and pulled out a small leather pouch. He pressed it into Luke's hand. "What's this?" Luke asked. "A token," the elder said simply, "for standing between me and harm." Luke opened the pouch and saw a single carved stone inside, etched with markings he didn't recognize. It felt oddly warm in his palm. The elder nodded once in thanks, then turned and walked away, his pace slow but steady. Luke watched him until he disappeared down the road leading toward the open prairie. By the time Luke turned to leave, the shopkeeper had gone back inside, and the street was almost empty. He slipped the pouch into his pocket, unsure why he hadn't just left it behind. That night, lying in the hayloft of an abandoned barn, Luke turned the carved stone over in his hand, wondering why it seemed heavier than it should. Outside, the cricket sang, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. He didn't know it yet, but by sunrise, his life would change forever, because the next day, the sound of hoofbeats would thunder into town, and they would come looking for him. Luke sat on the porch of the old barn, the sun setting behind the dusty rooftops of the small town. The image of the elder's weathered face stayed with him. He had never met anyone who looked at him quite like that, without suspicion, pity, or anger. It was strange, and it left a weight in his chest. The evening wind carried the smell of smoke from the trading post. Folks were still talking about the fight. Some saw Luke as reckless. Others muttered that it wasn't his business to step in. But Luke had learned a long time ago not to expect gratitude from the town. He hadn't done it for them. His stomach growled. He rummaged through his pack-half, a loaf of stale bread, some jerky, and a dented canteen of warm water. It would do. He chewed slowly, staring out at the horizon, wondering if the old man had made it back safely. As the night deepened, Luke lay on his bedroll inside the barn, the wooden beams groaning softly in the wind. He closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come easily. The elder's calm voice echoed in his mind. "You have a strong heart, young one." A distant howl broke the stillness. Wolves, far up in the hills. Luke's hand went to the small hunting knife at his belt. Not that it would do much against a pack, but it gave him comfort. He tried to shake the unease building in his gut, but the feeling lingered. Just past midnight, the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps woke him. He sat up, heart racing. The barn door creaked open. A figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the moonlight. Luke's hand tightened on his knife until he heard the voice. "It is me," the elder said quietly. Luke blinked in surprise. You shouldn't be out this late. It's dangerous." The old man stepped closer, his face illuminated by a sliver of moonlight. He held something wrapped in cloth and set it down in front of Luke. "For you," he said simply. Luke hesitated before unwrapping it. Inside was a small bundle of dried meat, a leather pouch of water, and a feather tied with a thin strip of rawhide. "I don't need charity," Luke said, though his empty stomach betrayed him. "This is not charity," the elder replied. "It is thanks, and a sign." He pointed to the feather. "When the sun rises, keep it with you. Others will know." Luke frowned. "Others? What do you mean?" The old man didn't answer directly. "You stood when no one else did. That will be remembered." Before Luke could ask more, the elder turned toward the door. "Wait," Luke called. "What's your name?" The old man paused. "I am Red Hawk." Then he stepped into the night and was gone. Luke sat in the dark for a long time, staring at the feather in his hand. A sign? Remembered by who? Sleep came in restless bursts, and when morning light filtered into the barn, Luke found himself gripping the feather like a lifeline. By noon, whispers were spreading through town. People claimed they'd seen movement out near the hills riders. Dozens of them. The kind of sight that made ranchers lock their gates and shopkeepers close early. Luke heard the rumors while hauling sacks for the blacksmith. "They say a whole war party's been spotted," one man told another. "Better keep your rifles close." Luke kept his head down, but unease prickled at him. He couldn't help but wonder if the elder's visit and the rumors were connected. As the sun dipped low, Luke headed back toward the barn. He felt the shift in the air before he saw anything, the sudden quiet, the way the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then he saw them, silhouettes along the ridge, horses, riders, more than he could count. The sun glinted off spears and bows. They didn't move toward town. They were looking down, straight at him. Luke's fingers closed around the feather in his pocket. The elder walked at a steady, unhurried pace, his worn moccasins barely making a sound on the dusty road. Luke followed a few steps behind, his own boots crunching with every step. The late afternoon sun was sinking lower, painting the plains in a warm gold, but the wind carried the promise of a cold night. "Where exactly are we going?" Luke finally asked, adjusting the small sack slung over his shoulder. The old man did not look back. "To my people," he replied simply, his voice carrying the weight of years. Luke frowned. The edge of town was already far behind them, and the dirt path was giving way to open grassland. "That's a long way to walk, isn't it?" The elder's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. "For some, yes. For me, it is just the way home." Luke had nothing better to do, truth be told, no real place to go, so he kept walking. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the whisper of wind through the tall grass. An hour later, the elder stopped beside a shallow creek. He crouched down, scooping water with his hands, drinking slowly. Luke knelt beside him, cupping water to his mouth. The water was cold, crisp, tasting of melted snow from the far-off mountains. "You didn't have to step in today," the elder said at last, his eyes fixed on the water. "They were gonna hurt you." Luke replied with a shrug. "They could have hurt you too." Luke's jaw tightened. "I've been hurt before. I can take it." The elder studied him for a moment, as though seeing something deeper than Luke wanted anyone to notice. "You have the eyes of someone who has walked through fire." Luke shifted uncomfortably. "Just bad luck, that's all." The old man did not press further. Instead, he rose and continued walking. As dusk fell, they reached the edge of a small grove of cottonwood trees. The elder stopped, gesturing to a clearing where a small fire pit lay surrounded by stones. "We will rest here." Luke gathered dry branches without being told, his instincts from months of sleeping outdoors kicking in. Soon, a fire crackled between them, its light dancing on their faces. The elder took something from his pouch, a bundle of dried meat, and offered some to Luke. It was tough but flavorful, smoky in a way Luke wasn't used to. They ate in silence for a while until the elder finally spoke again. "My name is Gray Hawk," he said. "Luke Carter," the boy replied. Gray Hawk nodded slowly, as if committing the name to memory. "Tomorrow we will reach my village. But you should know my people do not trust outsiders easily." Luke chuckled dryly. "Neither does your town." Something flickered in Gray Hawk's eyes, almost amusement, but it was gone in an instant. "They will see you for who you are, not what you are. That is the difference." The wind picked up, rattling the branches overhead. Luke stared into the fire, wondering why he felt an odd calm here, far from the noisy, suspicious streets of the town. When night fully fell, Gray Hawk unrolled a simple blanket and lay down without ceremony. Luke sat a while longer, watching the stars emerge one by one above the treetops. Somewhere deep inside, he wondered what kind of place this village would be and why he was even following this old man into the unknown. But he didn't have an answer. All he knew was that, for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel entirely alone. The fire's glow softened, the sounds of the night wrapped around him, and before long, Luke drifted into a restless sleep, unaware of the eyes watching from the darkness beyond the trees. Luke woke before sunrise, the air inside the barn heavy with the smell of dust and hay. His body ached from the fight the day before, though the bruises felt like small prices to pay. He sat up, brushing straw from his shirt, and listened. The town was still quiet. No church bells, no wagon wheels on the dirt road. Only the faint chirping of meadowlarks and the far-off rustle of the timsolov cottonwoods in the breeze. He didn't expect the elder to still be in town. Most folks from the tribes passed through quickly, taking what little business they had and leaving before trouble found them. But something told Luke this man wasn't gone. There had been a calm in his eyes yesterday, even while being shoved, and spat on as if he'd been here for reasons deeper than trading. By the time Luke wandered toward the trading post, the sun was rising gold over the rooftops. The morning light made the rough edges of the town look almost peaceful, until he noticed the silence wasn't just from sleep. People were awake. They were watching. A few stood on porches, some peering out windows, all of them looking down the road. Luke followed their gaze and froze. Riding in from the horizon was a line of riders, not 3 or 4, but dozens. Warriors, the kind Luke had only ever heard about in campfire tales. They came in a slow, steady formation, sunlight catching on the steel of their lances and rifles. Painted faces, feathers in their braids, beaded chest plates, and horses that moved like shadows over the earth. Luke guessed there were close to 100 of them. The townsfolk scattered to the sides, whispering nervously. Some ran to fetch rifles, but the sheriff barked at them to hold. The warriors weren't charging. They were approaching with the deliberate calm of men who weren't here to be turned away. Luke's chest tightened when he saw, at the front of the line, the same elder from yesterday. He sat tall on a black horse, dressed now in a red and white beaded robe that shimmered with every movement. The bruises on his face had faded, but his gaze was sharp, scanning the street until it landed on Luke. The warriors halted. The elder dismounted, walking forward with a dignity that made even the sheriff step back. The elder stopped in front of Luke, close enough that Luke could smell the sage on his clothing. "You stood," the elder said, his voice low but carrying in the quiet. When others would not, Luke didn't know what to say. His throat felt dry. "Wasn't right," he muttered. The elder studied him for a moment, then raised a hand. Behind him, one of the warriors brought forward a painted buffalo hide, its surface covered with intricate symbols and handprints. Another stepped forward, leading a riderless horse, a tall, chestnut stallion with a black mane. The elder spoke again, this time in a language Luke didn't understand. The warriors murmured in agreement, their voices rolling like distant thunder. The elder turned back to Luke, switching to English. "You have no home here," he said, not as a question but as a fact. "Come with us. Ride under our protection. Eat at our fires. Learn our ways. You will be among brothers." Luke's breath caught. An offer, no, a lifeline, was being held out to him. Behind the elder, 100 warriors waited, watching with solemn patience. He glanced at the townsfolk. Most avoided his eyes. Some looked shocked, others disgusted. The sheriff's face was unreadable, but Luke knew the truth. He had nothing. Here, no family, no place, just barns and scraps. Luke reached out and ran a hand down the stallion's neck. The horse snorted softly, as if already accepting him. "When do we leave?" Luke asked quietly. A slow smile crept across the elder's face. "Now." The warriors shifted, making space for him. Luke swung onto the stallion's back, feeling the powerful muscles beneath him. The elder mounted his black horse, and with a signal, the column turned and began riding out of town. Luke didn't look back. The sun was climbing higher, lighting the open plains ahead, and for the first time in years, he felt like he was riding toward something, not running from it. The sound of 100 horses' hooves filled the morning, a rhythm that matched the beating in his chest. Somewhere deep inside, Luke knew, whatever came next, his life had just changed forever. The sun had barely risen when Luke awoke to the sound of soft chanting outside the barn. At first, he thought it was the wind playing tricks on his ears. But as he sat up, the voices grew clear, measured, low, and melodic, like the hum of the earth itself. He pushed open the barn doors and froze. The dirt road leading into town was filled not with wagons or townsfolk, but with riders. Dozens of them, maybe more than 100. Their horses stood in quiet formation, their riders dressed in fringed buckskin, eagle feathers, and beaded sashes that caught the early light. Faces painted with bold lines of red, black, and white. It was like a living wall of history had appeared. Overnight. At the front sat the old man from yesterday the elder Luke had defended. He was astride a tall speckled horse, wearing a long robe of tanned hide adorned with quillwork and small shells. But it wasn't just the elder's presence that startled Luke, It was the way all those warriors seemed to be looking at him. Luke stepped into the morning air, unsure if he should approach or hide. "Luke Carter," the elder called, his voice carrying across the road like it was meant for more than just Luke's ears. "Come forward." Luke swallowed hard, glancing over his shoulder toward town. He could already see curious faces peeking from windows, some of the bolder townsfolk, standing on porches, hands shading their eyes. The same people who had always kept their distance from him now stared with wide-eyed disbelief. Luke walked forward slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel. The elder smiled faintly and motioned for him to stand beside his horse. "I spoke of you to my people last night," the elder said. "Of the young man who stood when others turned away." Luke shrugged, feeling the heat creep into his face. "Wasn't much. Just did what was right." The elder's smile deepened. "Among my people, that is no small thing. Many would walk past an old man being shamed. You did not. For that, you have my respect and theirs." A murmur passed through the warriors like the rustling of leaves in a sudden wind. The elder continued, "We have ridden far to bring you an offer." He glanced toward the town for a moment, then lowered his voice so it carried only to Luke. "Come with us. Live among us. You would have food, shelter, and a place in our camp. No more sleeping in barns or wondering where you belong." Luke's mouth went dry. The words were so unexpected that for a moment he wondered if he'd heard wrong. He stopped, unsure what to say. "Why me? I'm just nobody." The elder's eyes softened, but there was a weight in them too. "Because you have shown the heart of a warrior without even knowing our ways. That is rare. We do not measure worth by where a man was born or the color of his skin, but by his actions." Luke's chest tightened. He glanced at the warriors, then at the small cluster of townsfolk watching from the safety of the boardwalks. He had lived here his whole life, yet no one had ever spoken to him like this, like he mattered. Behind him, a familiar sharp voice cut through the morning. "Luke, don't you listen to them." It was Harlan, the storekeeper, his face red and tight. "They're just trying to take you in and turn you against your own kind." Luke turned slightly, meeting Harlan's glare. "My own kind?" he repeated, bitterly. "You mean the same folks who wouldn't hire me to stack feed sacks? Who? Toss me scraps like I'm some stray dog?" Gasps rippled through the watching crowd, but Luke didn't care. He turned back to the elder. "If I went with you, what would I have to do?" "You would learn," the elder said simply. "Learn to hunt, to ride, to speak our tongue. Learn our songs, our ways. And you would earn your place, same as any of our young men." Luke hesitated, looking at the faces of the warriors, calm, steady, unafraid. A strange warmth filled his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Still, he wasn't ready to answer. "Can I think about it?" The elder nodded once. "We will camp by the river tonight. Come before the moon rises, and you will ride with us. If not," he paused, "we will understand." With that, the elder turned his horse, and the warriors moved as one, parting in silence, then closing ranks again, riding toward the river in a long, graceful line. The sound of their hoofbeats lingered long after they were gone, leaving Luke standing in the road, caught between the life he had always known and the one he had never imagined could be his. Tomorrow he would have to choose. The first light of dawn poured over the hills like molten gold, and with it came a deep, steady thrum in the air, the sound of many hooves. Luke was already awake, having slept little. He had spent the night in a kind of restless trance, wondering if the elders' people would truly return, and if they did, what that would mean for him. By the time he stepped outside the small lean-to he had taken shelter in, dust was rising from the northern trail. Shapes began to emerge through the early haze, riders, at least 100 of them, their silhouettes. Framed by the morning sun, the sight was awe-inspiring. Men and women alike, dressed in leather, beadwork, and feathers, rode with straight-backed pride. Their horses were painted with handprints and streaks of white, red, and black. At their head rode the elder he had defended 2 days before, sitting tall despite his age, his braids swaying gently. The townsfolk saw them too. A wave of nervous murmurs rolled through the dusty main street. Storekeepers stepped onto their porches. Mothers hurried their children inside. The sheriff emerged from his office, thumb hooked into his belt, trying to look braver than he felt. No one could remember the last time so many native warriors had ridden into town at once. Luke didn't move. He stood in the center of the street, heartbeat quickening, not from fear but from the weight of what was happening. He knew this was because of him, though whether that was good or bad, he couldn't yet tell. The riders slowed as they reached the heart of town. Horses snorted, hooves clopping against the hard-packed earth. The elder raised his hand, and the entire column halted in perfect unison. For a moment, there was only the sound of creaking leather and the faint jingle of reins. The elder dismounted with surprising grace for his age. The other warriors remained on horseback, their sharp eyes sweeping the street. He walked toward Luke, his expression unreadable. "You," the elder said in a voice that carried, even without shouting. "Luke Carter." Luke swallowed, nodding. "Yes, sir." "You defended me when others did not," the elder continued. "When they saw only an old man." "You saw a man worth standing for," Luke shifted, unsure what to say. "Seemed the right thing to do." The elder smiled faintly, then turned to gesture at the warriors behind him. "My people have not forgotten honor, and when honor is shown, it is repaid." The crowd watching from doorways and windows leaned forward, sensing something was about to happen. A younger warrior rode forward, carrying a long, wrapped bundle. He stopped before Luke, dismounted, and knelt, an act that sent a ripple of shock through the onlookers. With careful hands, he unwrapped the bundle, revealing a bow of polished ashwood, intricately carved and inlaid with turquoise, alongside. It was a quiver of arrows, the fletching dyed in bright colors. "This was my son's," the elder said, his voice lower now, meant for Luke but still audible to those nearby. "He died defending our home. I have kept it, waiting for the right one to carry it." Luke stared at the bow, unable to speak. He could feel the weight of the moment, heavier than anything he'd known. "You have no home, no family." Elder went on. "We offer you both." Gasps rippled through the townsfolk. An invitation like this was unheard of. Luke's mind swirled. Images of lonely nights in barns, of cold winters with no one to turn to, of doing everything alone. And then, images of riding with these proud warriors, of campfires under the stars, of belonging somewhere for the first time in years. Luke began, but his throat tightened. He took a deep breath. "Why me? You don't even know me." The elder's eyes softened. "I know enough. When a man risks himself for another, without thought of gain, it tells more than years of words." The sun rose higher, lighting the scene in gold. All eyes were on Luke, waiting to see if he would accept or refuse. Luke reached for the bow. His fingers brushed the smooth wood, feeling its warmth as though it had been waiting for him. The elder's faint smile deepened. Whether Luke realized it or not, his life had just shifted forever. The dawn broke soft and gold over the prairie, painting the grasslands in long shadows. Luke sat alone by the dying embers of the fire, staring into the horizon. The camp around him stirred slowly, warriors speaking in low voices, women preparing food, the elder humming a tune so faint it was almost lost to the wind. But Luke's mind wasn't in the camp. It was already on the road back to town. The night before, the elder had spoken to him at length. "You are welcome here," the old man had said, his weathered hand resting on Luke's shoulder. A warrior's heart is not bound by blood or tribe. It is bound by the deeds a man chooses. The offer was clear. Stay with them. Become part of their people. Learn their ways. It was tempting. More tempting than Luke wanted to admit. He had never belonged anywhere. Not in the town where folks crossed the street when they saw him. Not in the homes of the farmers who'd hire him for a week, then send him away without a word. But here, in the circle of these strangers, there had been something respect, even kindness. And yet, he knew he couldn't stay. The elder understood without Luke saying a word. Your road is not finished, he had said, smiling gently. But wherever it leads, you will carry this place with you. Now, as the sun climbed higher, Luke saddled the horse they had given him. A fine animal, painted in white and brown, its mane thick and wild. It was a gift from the warriors, along with a small pouch of coins and a handmade knife with a bone handle. For the boy who fought without fear, one of them had said as he pressed it into Luke's hand. The entire village gathered as Luke prepared to leave. The elder stood at the front, leaning on his carved staff. The warriors were lined up behind him, their expression solemn. Then, without warning, a young man stepped forward, a tall warrior with long black hair and sharp eyes. He held out a single feather. This is to show you are a friend to my people, he said. If you ever return, no man will raise a hand against you. Luke accepted it silently, his throat too tight for words. He tied the feather to the strap of his satchel, knowing it was worth more than gold. When he finally mounted the horse, the elder raised his voice so all could hear. This boy stood alone against three who sought to harm an old man. He did not think of reward or safety, only of what was right. Let the wind carry his name. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Luke could feel their eyes on him, eyes that no longer saw him as an outsider, but as someone worthy. He gave the reins a light pull, and the horse began to walk. The warriors parted to let him through, their heads held high. A few children ran alongside for a while, laughing and calling his name. Then the camp was behind him, and the open plain stretched out ahead. The ride back to town was quiet except for the sound of the wind and the steady rhythm of hooves on dirt. Luke thought about the offer to stay, about the strange twist of fate that had brought him here. In the end, he realized something important. He didn't need to belong to a place to have worth. He just needed to keep doing what was right. No matter who saw it. When he reached the outskirts of town, people stopped and stared. The boy they had dismissed as trouble was riding a strong horse, carrying himself like someone who had been tested and proven. Some looked curious, others suspicious. But Luke didn't slow down for them. He rode straight past the saloon, past the trading post where it had all begun, and toward the open road. Somewhere out there was the next place, the next fight, the next person who needed help. As the town faded behind him, the feather on his satchel fluttered in the wind. It was a reminder that even the loneliest roads could lead to moments of belonging, if only for a little while. Luke smiled faintly, tipped his hat against the sun, and rode. On the horizon swallowed him, leaving only dust and the memory of the boy who had stood his ground.